No one drew a sword against him. No assassin waited in the shadows. No executioner raised an axe. His own brother chose something far crueler. He handed him a royal decree stamped with the king's seal, smiled as if granting a favor, and condemned him to a place from which no one had ever returned. The Exclusion Zone, a land abandoned 50 years earlier after a wave of demonic corruption poisoned its forests, rivers, and beasts. Officially, it no longer belonged to the kingdom. Unofficially, it had become the kingdom's graveyard. Murderers, debtors, political enemies, failed nobles, anyone powerful people wanted to erase without staining their own hands. That was where Caden was being sent. His crime, existing. As the younger son of House Ravenheart, he should never have mattered. But fate had played a dangerous trick. His older brother Derek inherited the family's blood seal, a magical mark proving his right to rule. Caden was born without it, an empty one, worthless, or so everyone believed, until Caden married, until his wife became pregnant. Old legends whispered that, once every few generations, a child born to an empty bloodline could awaken the seal once again. If that happened, the younger branch of the family could challenge the elder for its inheritance. Derek wasn't willing to gamble, so instead of killing his brother openly, he erased him. Rain poured from a sky the color of cold iron. A battered wagon struggled through knee-deep mud before stopping beside a weathered wooden post. The driver climbed down. Without saying a word, he threw Caden's single sack into the mud. Then another. His wife, Ara, nearly slipped climbing from the wagon. 4 months pregnant, already exhausted, already soaked by freezing rain. The driver avoided looking at either of them. They told me not to cross the marker. His voice sounded almost apologetic. He pointed toward the ancient sign standing beside the road. The words had been carved so deeply into the wood that 50 years of rain had failed to erase them. Beyond this point lies the Exclusion Zone. The Royal Council accepts no responsibility for those who enter. No responsibility, not for hunger, not for monsters, not for death. The driver climbed back onto the wagon. He cracked his whip. The horses turned. Within seconds, the wagon disappeared into the rain. No farewell, no sympathy, only silence. Caden watched until the last wheel vanished beyond the trees. Then he looked toward the forest. It wasn't merely dark. It felt wrong. The trees leaned together like giant spectators watching new victims arrive. Mist curled between twisted trunks. Even the wind refused to sing. Ara quietly wrapped both hands around her stomach. Neither of them spoke. Words couldn't change reality. They had been abandoned. Caden knelt beside their only sack. Everything they owned fit inside. A worn hunting knife, an old wooden bow, 10 arrows, a coil of rope, a piece of salted meat, one flint, nothing else, no blankets, no tools, no coins, no hope. He looked at the dull knife. It wasn't even sharp enough to shave bark. Derek hadn't intended him to survive. He had intended him to disappear. Forever. Ara finally broke the silence. Are we gonna die? Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't crying anymore. She had cried enough during the journey. Now, she simply wanted the truth. Caden looked into the forest, then back at her. No. Just one word. Simple. Certain. He didn't know if it was true, but he knew something else. If he showed fear, she would lose the strength to keep walking. So he smiled, a small one. The same smile he had worn years earlier after falling from a horse during training. His father had once asked why he smiled after breaking 2 ribs. Caden had answered, "Because standing hurts less than giving up." That stubbornness had never left him. Unlike his noble relatives, Caden had never learned politics. He couldn't cast spells. He had never commanded soldiers. Court nobles mocked him because he preferred forests over banquets. While they memorized family histories, he memorized animal trails. While they practiced sword dances, he tracked wolves through snow. While Derek attended royal feasts, Caden spent days hunting with old gamekeepers who cared little for noble titles. Those old hunters had taught him one lesson above all: the forest never hated anyone. It simply rewarded those who understood it. That lesson was about to decide whether they lived or died. "Stay close." Caden slung the bow across his shoulder. Knife in hand, he stepped beneath the trees. The moment they entered, the outside world vanished. Rain became distant. Light faded. Even the air felt heavier. Each breath carried the faint scent of wet iron, as if blood had soaked into the earth decades ago and never truly washed away. The forest wasn't silent. It breathed. Soft cracking echoed beneath the soil. Branches shifted without wind. Somewhere far away, something howled, not like a wolf, something larger, something older. Ara instinctively moved closer. Caden slowed his pace. Every 10 steps, he stopped, listened, watched, smelled the air. Old habits, habits that had once amused palace servants. Now, those habits were keeping them alive. Nearly 20 minutes passed. Suddenly, Caden froze, his eyes narrowed. The ground looked ordinary, yet something felt different. He crouched, placed one hand against the damp earth. The instant his fingers touched the soil, pain exploded behind his eyes. The world changed, everything around him blurred. Then, another world appeared beneath the first. Footprints glowed pale green across the forest floor, some fresh, some ancient. Trails stretched through trees like glowing rivers. A stream shimmered somewhere ahead. Stone ruins appeared in his mind, though hidden behind hills. Animal scents became visible. Distances, directions, hidden paths. Every piece of information flooded into his mind all at once. His breathing stopped. What? Blood suddenly dripped onto the ground, warm, bright red, from his nose. The vision shattered. The forest returned to normal. Caden stumbled backward, nearly falling. His head pounded as though someone had struck it with a hammer. Ara rushed toward him. "Caden." He quickly wiped the blood away before she saw how much there was. "I'm all right." He wasn't, but he remembered everything. A ruined stone building, less than a kilometer west, fresh water nearby, and something large had passed north less than an hour ago. He couldn't explain how he knew. He simply did. For the first time since his exile, a spark of hope flickered inside him. Perhaps the cursed land had not only taken something from him, perhaps it had given something back. And somewhere beyond the trees, hidden beneath 50 years of forgotten wilderness, their new life had already begun. Era stared at the blood on Caden's sleeve. "You said you were fine." Caden forced a faint smile. "I've had worse." It was a lie. His head still throbbed as though invisible hands were squeezing his skull. But one thing mattered more than the pain. He knew where to go. He pointed through the trees. There's a stone building less than a kilometer from here. Ara frowned. You've been here before? He shook his head. No. Then how do you know? For a long moment he didn't answer. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? Finally he said quietly, I can feel it. Ara searched his face. She knew he wasn't telling her everything, but she also knew he wasn't lying. Without another question, she nodded. The two continued deeper into the cursed forest. The ground slowly rose. The trees became older. Their trunks twisted into impossible shapes, as though they had spent decades struggling against something buried beneath the earth. Moss covered nearly every stone. Broken watchtowers appeared between the branches before disappearing again behind vines. Signs of a forgotten kingdom. After nearly 40 minutes of walking, Caden stopped, exactly where the strange vision had shown him. Hidden beneath hanging ivy stood the remains of an old frontier guard post. Most of the roof had collapsed. One wall had fallen inward, but the stone foundation remained strong. This will do. Caden carefully entered first. Knife ready, every corner smelled of damp earth and old animal nests. Scratches covered one wall. Bones lay scattered near the entrance. Something had once lived here, but judging from the dust, it had been gone for months. He searched every room twice before lowering his guard. It's safe. For the first time that day, Ara smiled, only a little, but it was enough. The rest of the afternoon became work. Caden dragged fallen branches inside. He cleared rotten leaves from the floor. He piled flat stones into a crude fireplace beneath a gap in the broken roof. The smoke would have somewhere to escape. By sunset, the ruined building had become a shelter, not a home, but somewhere they could survive the night. Caden struck the flint. Tiny sparks danced across dry moss. A thin thread of smoke appeared. Then, fire. Warm orange light pushed back the darkness gathering outside. Ara stretched her cold hands toward the flames. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply listened to the crackling wood. It was the first comforting sound they had heard since leaving the estate. Their meal lasted less than 5 minutes. One piece of salted meat, a handful of wild roots, cold water collected from a puddle outside. Caden watched Ara divide the food. She quietly pushed the larger portion toward him. You need your strength. He pushed it back. So do you. You hunted all day. You are eating for two. After a brief silence, she accepted. Neither mentioned how little remained. Tomorrow, they would need fresh meat, or they would begin starving. Before dawn, Caden woke. The forest outside was silent, too silent. He took his bow, checked each arrow. 10, only 10 chances. Missed too many, and they would have nothing. He looked at Ara, still asleep beneath his cloak. I'll be back. She opened one eye. Come back alive. He nodded, then disappeared into the mist. The stream from his strange vision was exactly where he remembered. Clear, cold, untouched. He drank deeply, then crouched beside the muddy bank. Tracks, many of them, small animals, foxes, wild boars, something with claws the size of a man's hand. Then, one enormous print, split hooves, far larger than any deer. Fresh. His heartbeat quickened. He followed every broken branch. Every bent blade of grass, every scraped tree trunk told a story. Hours passed, then he saw it, standing beside another stream, a border deer. It was twice the size of an ordinary stag. Its antlers looked like black stone. Sharp, poisonous spines covered its back. Gray plates of hardened skin protected its chest. Guild hunters considered one border deer equal to several ordinary monsters. Entire hunting parties had died trying to kill one. Caden was alone. Common sense said to leave. He ignored it. Instead, he slowly closed his eyes. The strange power awakened once more. Pain shot through his head. The world divided. The monster began glowing from within. Its bones, its muscles, even the flow of blood became visible. Then he saw it, a small crimson point beneath the throat, hidden behind the thick armor, the only vulnerable place. Blood ran from his nose again. The vision vanished. He staggered, but now he knew exactly where to strike. Charging such a creature would be suicide. So Caden relied on something stronger than courage, patience. Nearby he found a thick climbing vine. He stretched it tightly across a narrow game trail, low enough to catch the creature's injured rear leg. Then he climbed behind a fallen tree. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. The border deer finally began walking. Each step shook the earth. Caden picked up a small stone. He threw it. The stone landed beyond the trail. The monster lifted its head, then charged toward the sound, exactly as Caden expected. Its wounded legs struck the hidden vine. For a fraction of a second, the enormous beast lost balance. Its throat lifted. That single opening was all Caden needed. He released the arrow. The bowstring snapped. The arrow flew straight through the crimson weak point. The border deer staggered, took 3 heavy steps, collapsed. Silence returned. Caden remained perfectly still, waiting 1 minute, 2, only after the beast stopped, moving completely. Did he finally approach? He had done it, alone, without magic, without soldiers, without guild training. The impossible lay dead before him. The hardest part had only begun. A careless butcher could ruin half the animal. Caden worked slowly. Every cut was deliberate. He avoided the poison glands beneath the spines. He removed the hide in one perfect piece, not a single unnecessary cut. Then, deep inside the chest, he found it. A glowing crimson core, small, smooth, worth more silver than most peasants would earn in years. He wrapped it carefully inside cloth. Nothing would be wasted. Not the hide, not the meat, not even the bones. By the time he finished, the sun was already sinking. His shoulders screamed from exhaustion as he lifted the heavy load onto his back. Every step toward the shelter felt heavier than the last. But one thought kept him moving. Ara was waiting. And tonight, for the first time since their exile, she would eat until she was full. As the ruined guard post came into view through the trees, warm firelight flickered inside. Caden smiled. The cursed forest had tried to claim another victim. Instead, it had created its first survivor. The weight of the border deer pressed down on Caden's shoulders with every step. His muscles burned, his hands were covered in dried blood. His legs trembled from exhaustion. But none of that mattered. For the first time since crossing into the exclusion zone, he wasn't returning empty-handed. He was bringing home enough food to keep them alive. As the ruined guard post came into view through the fading evening light, smoke curled gently through the broken roof. The fire was still burning. Ara had kept it alive. The moment she heard footsteps outside, she grabbed the old hunting knife and stood beside the doorway. Only after recognizing Caden's silhouette did she lower the blade. Then her eyes widened. She stared at the enormous creature hanging across his shoulders. "Caden," she whispered, "you actually did it." Caden let the massive carcass slide onto the stone floor with a heavy thud. The entire hut seemed to shake. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at the monster lying between them. Finally, Caden smiled. "We're eating well tonight." The next 2 hours were spent working. Every piece of meat had to be cleaned before nightfall. The poisonous spines were removed one by one. The hide was stretched carefully across the floor. The crimson monster core was wrapped in clean cloth and hidden beneath a loose stone in the corner of the hut. Ara watched him work with quiet amazement. "You know exactly what you're doing." Caden nodded. "One mistake can poison the meat." He continued cutting. "My old hunting instructor always said, the hunt isn't finished until every useful part has been saved." Nothing was wasted. The liver, the heart, the bones, even the tendons were carefully rolled and tied together. Someday they would become bowstrings or sewing thread. Out here, everything had value. When the work was finally finished, Ara filled the old iron helmet they had found inside the guard post with clean water from the stream. It wasn't meant for cooking. Once, it had belonged to a soldier who died defending this border decades ago. Now, it served as their cooking pot. Caden added fresh meat, wild roots, edible herbs he had gathered along the way. Soon, steam filled the shelter. The rich smell of cooked venison replaced the damp scent of old stone. Acha closed her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time food had smelled this good. Perhaps back at the estate, before everything changed. Neither of them rushed the meal. The first spoonful was almost painfully hot, yet neither cared. Warm food spread through their bodies like life itself. For several minutes, the only sound inside the shelter was the crackling fire. Then, Ara laughed. A quiet laugh, barely louder than the flames. Caden looked up. It was the first time he had heard her laugh since the day of their exile. "What?" he asked. She smiled through tired eyes. "I almost forgot what hope feels like." Those simple words struck Caden harder than any sword. Hope. That was something Derek believed he had taken away forever. Yet here, in the middle of the cursed wilderness, hope had somehow survived. Later that night, the rain returned. Heavy drops hammered against the broken roof. Cold winds slipped through the cracks in the walls. Outside, something enormous roared somewhere deep within the forest. The sound echoed through the valley. Ara instinctively moved closer to the fire. "Will it come here?" Caden listened carefully. The roar came again, far away. "No." He added another log to the flames. "Not tonight." Still, he kept his bow beside him, just in case. Sleep refused to come easily. Instead, Caden stepped outside. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Clouds drifted across the moon. The cursed forest stretched endlessly in every direction. Dark, silent, ancient. Anyone else would have seen only death. Caden saw something different. Water, game, shelter, resources, possibilities. He looked back toward the small stone hut. Inside, Ara slept peacefully beside the dying fire. She trusted him completely. That trust was heavier than the border deer had been. It was now his responsibility to protect not only her, but the child she carried. He quietly clenched his fist. I won't fail. The forest answered only with the whisper of leaves. The following morning began before sunrise. Caden walked outside with his bow. Mist covered the valley. Birds still refused to sing. He climbed a nearby hill, closed his eyes, and once again reached for the strange power inside him. Instantly, the world split apart. Glowing trails spread across the landscape. Fresh footprints crossed the eastern hills. Small animals gathered near the southern stream. Hidden veins of unusual plants shimmered beneath the trees. Farther away, something much larger moved. Its trail glowed brighter than everything else. Then, pain. A sharp burning sensation exploded inside his skull. Blood streamed from both nostrils. He immediately released the power. The vision vanished. He dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. So that was the price. The ability wasn't free. Every use drained his strength. Too much. And it might kill him. Yet even those few seconds had revealed more information than an ordinary hunter could gather in weeks. It was dangerous, but priceless. As he stood again, Caden looked across the endless wilderness. The kingdom believed this place was empty, forgotten, worthless. They were wrong, very wrong. Rare beasts, medicinal herbs, hidden ruins, unknown treasures. The cursed land wasn't dead. It was simply waiting for someone capable of surviving it, someone capable of claiming it. A slow smile spread across Caden's face. Derek had believed exile was a death sentence. Instead, he had handed his younger brother an entire frontier waiting to be conquered. Caden looked toward the horizon where the kingdom lay beyond the mountains. One day, he whispered, you'll regret sending me here. The morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the ruined guard post. It was still only a shelter, but one day it would become a home, then a village, then something far greater. And it would all begin with one hunter, one pregnant wife, and a single impossible decision to survive.